Monday, the 1st of May 2023, International Workers' Day. Workers of the world unite. You have nothing to lose but your... Exactly. This week, Carlos Mesquita is with us in studio. We're talking about the unhoused, the response of the city, the province, and national government, or actually sometimes the lack thereof. Also, Daily Maverick published total BS in an attempt to manipulate public opinion in a story that News 24 says contains no facts. I'll be talking about that tomorrow. Meanwhile, in Sudan, warring generals seem intent on turning that country into dust as ceasefires break down. In Burundi, former Prime Minister arrested after the president alluded to the generals possibly plotting a coup. Cyril Ramaphosa has one foot on the platform, the other on the train to leave the International Criminal Court, or stay, or wait, who knows actually. Finally, Alan Winde puts together a Delta force to arrest Vladimirovich Putin as John Steenhuisen supports this call. It turns out that neither of them actually understand how the law really works. My name is Roscoe Palm. The track you're listening to is the Come Up by Audio Binger. How are you doing, Nantle?
I'm fine. Long weekend. And I'm here working on Workers' Day. I'm happy.
Good,
and all that good stuff.
I think workers who work on Workers' Day shouldn't get double pay. They should get quadruple pay in the spirit of what the holiday actually is.
Remind me, I must tell you something.
Okay.
Want my double pay? Sorry, double pay.
Yeah. So look, I don't really want to dally with the show because I think we're gonna have a in-depth one. But I really want to talk about this Alan Winde arresting Putin.
The call. Who do you think? Do you know? Last week I had the same thing where they call them ministers, the MEC's ministers. And we had one in, but I didn't want to tell the guy, like, dude, you're not really that minister, man. That type of mindset is worrying, man. Like, play your part, play your position, wait till you're there. Wait till you can bamboozle more people like you did in the Western Cape, and then you earned it, man.
No, they call them provincial ministers. There's things that we do in the Western Cape very differently to the rest of the country, and I think that is There's a program behind that. But enough of that. This Alan Winde thing, I can't tell the story any better than DJ Stacy. So this is how I feel completely. Let's.
Premier Alan Winde Winchips. If the Russian leader sets foot in the Western Cape, we as the provincial government will have him arrested by our own Western Cape government-funded law enforcement advancement plan officers. If SAPS is not instructed to act, we will. Meneer, vat jou kop reg. So julle wil vir Vladimir Putin, die president van Russia, arresteer. Maar julle kan nie gangsters in Hanover Park of in Menenberg of iewers in die Kaap arresteer nie. Julle kan nie eens die drug dealers arresteer nie. So jy wil men die ankel mors.
Every time you watch Putin walking, you must think, why does he walk like that? His left arm moves freely, but his right arm always remains still. Putin was a KGB officer for 16 years, and in the KGB manual, there is specific instruction on how officers should walk, so they can always be prepared to reach out their weapons.
Sien jy? Kyk wat weer hier. In die laaste video het iemand probeer naby kom aan die vice-president van Russia. Wat dink jy nou wat gaan gebeur met die president? Hoekom fokus jy nie eers op die gangsterisme en die dwelms en die geskietery in die Weskaapie voor jy nou met die groot honde wil speel? You want to bamba? You want to chill with the big dogs? Vat my julle se geveg en dreig om te alleen na die man toe en los vir ons uit van ons wil nie gebom word nie.
You wanna chill with the big dogs, you gotta not piss like a puppy. That's ultimately... Look, I don't want to say... There's so many things to say about this thing. First of all, provincial leap guys can't arrest a head of state. Secondly, even if they could, do you really want to fuck with a nuclear power like that?
Dude.
And also, it's even stupider because the Western Cape trades with Russia as well and Ukraine. It would destroy the Western Cape economically. So, really, this
So he
thing
didn't
is...
think it through, really. Just probably just in
He
a,
just said it because they
had a
got...
Trump moment.
Exactly. That Russia.
He had a Trump moment.
Yeah. And what makes it even worse than that is that they're concentrating on Kharkiv and not Kyles River. They're concentrating on Kiev and not Kailicha. Look inward at the problems that are happening here in your own province, my bro. Worry about that stuff.
They're in Alaska, and they're supposed to flip and worry about Manenberg.
Give DJ_Stacy a follow on TikTok. I think her content's really, really great. All right, another thing. Speaking of TikTok, came through. This is from Abdude786. Let's hear what he has to say about Manenberg.
The gentle brother.
The gentle brother.
Hi fam, trust you guys are well. Ek is hier in Manenberg en ek weet nie wie moet die hoor nie man. Maar wie ever ze is, as jy nou 'n counselor is, as jy nou official is van die council, ek wil net gewoon iets vir julle wys man. Kyk gewoon net die. Sien julle hier? Sien julle die water hier? As al op die reg die. Ek wil net gewoon wys. Kyk hier gou man. Kyk hier gou. Kyk hier. Kyk hier hoe moet die mense lewe? Dis aan times ook. Kyk hier. Die vrou moet boots loop om haar wasgoed te... Nou sê vir my, hoe is die mense pause om te lewe? Kyk hier, weet jy nou stink die goed? Kyk hier, as loop tot binne in die pad. Ek meen, dis mos highly unacceptable. Die rede ek sê is highly unacceptable. En ek wil niemand take, I don't want to become political about this thing, maar ons mos 'n council hier in Manenberg, right? Nou, die reference number was gegee, ek wil julle die message wys, op die 21ste van April, they gave us a reference number in order to fix this leaking sewage drain that's here in these people's yard, right? In the road where my mom lives. I just want to show you guys. Alright, now, the community members here in die pad by my maal in Manenberg, right? So julle kan sien now, your request for block drain for the channel has already been locked. Julle kan sien as a reference number now. This was on the 21st of April. I don't know if you guys can see that I look there. 21st of April. It's not really clear, nie? Maar on the 21st of April, this reference has been given, right? And the community members here in the street, I'm not going to mention any names, right? They at least took the initiative to approach, the councillor or the councillor's office, but to no avail. I'm just making this clear because whose job is it to follow up to make sure that because of the reference number, obviously they need to get a contractor out to come and fix this thing. But my question is, who's supposed to do the following up? Because who moet die mense lewe? Kyk hoe lyk die mense, die man kon nooit die kyk uit. As mos highly unacceptable, die mense kan nie hulle kos reg eet nie. And you know what, these people did whatever they could, especially this man, they did whatever he could. Hy het al die steps gevat en na die rentoffice toe gegaan. Kyk gou net die is die laaste boodskap wat hulle gesê het. Hulle moes nou die reference nommer gesien van die 21ste van April af, right? Now look at this message. Right, now this was last weekend Friday. Look there, another reference number. Last weekend Friday they will come in and assess the thing and make sure that they resolve and fix it, right? Right, now that was last week Friday. Up until today, look hier, kyk hoe liewe die mense. Ek staan dan by binne die water en die skak water. Right? Up until today, niemand op die ding kon fix. So my question is, wie se week is dit? Dis mos 'n helderes vir die mense, kinders, kyk hoe staan die mense hier. Ek meen is mos unacceptable, maar die mense moet boots hier, look hier. That lady must walk with boots just to hang up a washing because die skak water wat hier lê. Julle councillors en wie ever in charge is in die plek, julle moet julle vinger julle gat uitdraak. And make sure you guys are doing your job with due diligence. Maybe that's something you should think about. Ek hoop die video gaan julle wakker maak.
That's the gentle brother, and that's unacceptable. If we had half of the reaction to these sorts of daily lived experience issues in the neglected areas that we have for like Vladimir Putin and all these things that are theoretical, actually, then a lot of these. But I've got an answer for the gentle brother. Gentle brother, this is the information that I have for you. The councillor is Bonita Jacobs, to my knowledge. Her number is 084-740-3039. This is publicly available information that you can find when you Google a public representative. So it's not doxing anybody. If she's not the right person, Bonita Jacobs, then she will be able to point you in the right direction. Now, another thing came down the line about this with the failure to deliver basic services. But we must worry about Putin. Let's go to the next one.
Yeah, we wanted to flip and cross into here.
Holy shit.
And look
So
here.
this is Weinberg, right?
You can't
Weinberg.
fucking
This is
cross in
Weinberg.
here. You flipping drown in your fucking sorrows. Yo, this is Jahannam, no?
Yo, what the
Is there someone humming in jail now? You want to try and attempt it? This is actually the Sirat. This is the Sirat.
That's kak
This is sick, man.
How did this happen?
Sick, yeah.
Content.
Man.
Yo, that's some devs posting on TikTok.
Yo.
Government, South Africa government, please clean Wynberg. Fucking, please clean Wynberg's subways clean. And you got this flat. You got clean this, looks. Every fucking, you must see it look from the other side
The
here.
subway looks.
Yeah, boy, yes!
I mean, yeah. So, the ward councillor for Wynberg is Emile Langhoven. You can reach him at Emile, E-M-I-L-E dot Langenhoven, Langenhoven, at capetown.gov.za. And I will try and get his phone number by...
Can we just, while you're looking for that as well, can we just say, so the people that you're mentioning, this is an open invitation if they feel that we're being wrong by giving their names or whatever the case may be. You're more than welcome to come onto the program and let's have a discussion of the way forward to make it better for the ratepayers, for everybody living in the city, for everybody.
Yeah.
That's the reason why we're doing this.
No, exactly. And so, you know, you shouldn't have to make a TikTok to go viral to get service delivery. That's basically what it comes down to. It's supposed to be somebody calls into the city's helpline, they log the complaint, they assign the people to fix it, and then they fix it. It should be that simple. You don't have to be a social media master to get basic service.
But I'm just glad, to be honest with you, I'm glad that so not just Stacey, she does it a lot with Gentle Brother. I'm actually glad because a lot of people say, the influencers are not doing it enough. This is a step forward. This is how can I say, conscientized? No, is that the word? The youth, because the youth are following this individuals, and if they're making content like this and they start thinking like this, they're gonna influence the youth. So much respect to Gentle Brother for and Stacey for doing their thing, man. And not just talk about Prime and cool drinks. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, okay, I don't want to go further down, but I
just want to mention it.
Yeah,
Prime.
like fake influencers are selling you 60 Rand bottles of Prime, and like real influencers have to, bring the attention that you like living next to basically an open sewage line in Manenberg.
Yep.
I mean, that's crazy.
Anyway.
So the number of Emile Langenhoven, as per the City of Cape Town website, is 064 684 2445. I hope those two numbers that we gave out are currently being really... I hope that those numbers are popping. Back to tonight's show. I'm really, really, really excited to welcome Carlos Mesquita to the show. You are a homeless activist. Well, first of all, there's a discussion to be had between homeless and unhoused. Are we going to be using the
not at all
homeless and unhoused? There's a confusion about, or rather people don't think about the definition of homeless. They use it all their lives. What is the difference between homeless and unhoused?
I think historically, I also never had a problem using the word homeless, and internationally, I still find that most people use it and it's acceptable. Unfortunately, in South Africa and in the context that I've found myself working, it's unacceptable because when you ask the city or the government what services do they provide for unhoused people, they'll tell you homeless services. Now, what the hell is a homeless service? Because to me, it refers to a home. You're not giving a home, so what service are you providing? And unfortunately, it's given the powers that be an excuse to sort of group everybody together that is unhoused and offer a one-size-fits-all solution for everybody that's without a home. And that, unfortunately, is unacceptable. They're basically defining people with that word, whereas it's only a state that they're in at the moment. So it's not a trait of theirs, it's a state that they're in that can change at any moment. And rather than define people by that state, they should be saying people experiencing homelessness, because then that's the experience they have at the moment. It doesn't define who you are, which provides some dignity for the person that is in that situation at that point.
And just before I get to why today, the 1st of May, is a very auspicious day for you, the term homeless, even people unhoused, do have a home. And I think that's sort of what makes a person whole, having a home, a community.
Correct.
Yeah.
I think that, people are very aware of the encampments that we have around us at the moment. One of the reasons for those encampments forming is precisely that sense of belonging that they get there, and that to them is their home. So when they're breaking down structures, it is somebody's home. That's where they feel comfortable, and that is where they have got, that's why when we say that the shelters are not conducive to, and why people say they don't want to go to shelters, there is no space that they can actually call their own, or where they have control over, or privacy in, that they can exercise their own social activities in. It's all in common spaces, and so that can't be considered a home. Whereas in a tent or whatever the space is that they've got on the outside, they consider those homes. That is exactly where they are. They've got, some kind of say in that space.
So today is the 1st of May.
Yeah.
It's a very auspicious day for you.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me why that is?
Well, at exactly this time, I think we were not even in town yet. 3 years ago, we were on our way from Strandfontein, the now notorious camp that was opened by the city of Cape Town for unhoused people. And it's 3 years ago that we emerged from Strandfontein. Of course, we were the last group. We actually stayed in an extra day we wanted to make a statement that we would not be out on the 31st of April, but that we'd move out on the 1st. And so we left on the 1st under very strange circumstances, but we were on our way we were then dumped in front of Kulenburg. In about an hour's time, we were being dumped in Kulenburg 3 years ago.
Now, I want to get to all of those conditions around the camp. The fact that it was, the Human Rights Commission said it was more like a prison than anything that would be a humane place for people to stay. The fact that the city wasted a lot of money, that, the reasons why they created this encampment. But, nobody starts off like wanting to be unhoused. So how did you end up being unhoused and ending up in this Strandfontein unhoused camp for unhoused?
The reason I do what I do and try and get as many people as possible to actually listen to my lived experience of becoming homeless and or being unhoused is precisely to change people's mindsets and the myths that people have, the idea that they have of who an unhoused person is. And I am hoping that people that are able to interact with me now are reminded every now and again that I could be, and the person that I see tomorrow on the street corner could be another Cuddles. I mean, there's plenty of us around. I mean, I'm not special. I've met such wonderful people that were and are on the streets, people that have done a lot more for me, and they did a lot more for me whilst I was on the streets, be they that they are considered gangsters or whatever people want to call individuals. These are all individuals, and like in any house community, you get good and bad. My story basically starts where I can tell you I was a top student at school. I had not a privileged upbringing, but I had basically a normal middle-class upbringing. I went to university, I got my degree, I opened my own businesses in Pretoria. I had music stores, and then I started a record company. I won 2 FNB Sama awards. And I had a lovely property in Sea Point, Upper Sea Point. I had a holiday house, and I had one in Pretoria and Waterkloof, which are all upmarket areas. And I landed up on the streets. So it's a very long story to go into. I think
we have the time, no problem.
I've got a book coming out soon, so I have to leave something for the book as well. But it just shows you that anybody can land up on the streets, and it's not always the reasons that people expect. Anybody that has got issues that they haven't dealt with, and I've got plenty of them, or had plenty that I hadn't dealt with. I think I've dealt with most, I hope. Serious issues of abuse that not even my parents or family were aware of, that I never discussed with anybody. And these are the type of things that, when you do, if I go back to the first time I did a line of cocaine, which was at the Winchester Mansions, so it will tell you at what level I was at that point in my life. And I had an artist that was about to win an FNB Sama award, which I was quite sure the person would win. And I was trying to convince the person to actually go to Johannesburg for the award ceremony. And the artist said wasn't in the mood. She didn't feel she was going to win. And then she said to me, well, do a line of coke with me and I'll go with you. And I tell you, I don't know how I survived that line of coke. It was done on a mirror and it was about a ruler-sized line of coke. But besides the fact that my brain was frozen, it probably gave me that feeling. That night I had that feeling that I was complete. And obviously it's a false sense of security and a false sense of completion, but it was there. People used to think that I was, a very together person. I used to get onto the stage and I was probably more interviewed than my artists were interviewed because I was that type of record company executive, but I hated it. I hated the limelight. I couldn't wait to get back home and I'm still like that. I'm still, when they said to me in Strandfontein to become the voice of the group of us that formed the Strandfontein Homeless Action Committee and the media liaison, I thought, oh no, not this again, please, because I really can't, it's not who I am. So I was hiding those issues by the drug basically said to me, this is what I need. And I went, I didn't like the cocaine. Eventually I left it overnight. It was something happened. I didn't like what had happened. I associated it to the drug and I left it. The next thing I knew, I was on alcohol. So the one replaces the other, and people don't realize it doesn't have to be. Some addictions are more frowned upon than others. There are people that overeat. There are people that oversex. There's all sorts of addictions, and that is a sign of something missing in your life, something that is not right in your life, and one has to address those issues. I have found that addressing those issues is more important than anything else, irrespective of who you address it with. So I landed up on the streets eventually. Those that follow my column in the Argus will know I've been publishing basically the last 3 weeks about a 6-month period where I actually went into the slide, into landing up on the streets, and then the first night on the streets. With regards to Strandfontein, on the 27th of March, which was my birthday, I had gone up to friends where I used to stay before in Van Riebeeck Park, which is just at the foot of the mountain. And the lockdown had been announced, and that was basically the first day of lockdown. And
that was the hard lockdown. That was the lockdown. 2 weeks.
We didn't even know what was going on.
Yeah.
Let me be honest with you. As much as I tried to remain au fait with what was going on in the news, when people, I remember the day before I'd gone on a scuttle in Sea Point, and a lady had said to me, "But where are you going to stay?" And I said to her, "Where I normally stay, in the mountain." I didn't know she was. Obviously, later I realized she was concerned about where was I going to be with the lockdown. But I really didn't realize when people said to me, "But you're not going to be able to trade tomorrow," because I had a store at that stage. I traded in front of the police station opposite the parade, as well as on the parade. And when people were saying to me, "But you can't trade tomorrow," and I'm thinking, "But why can't I trade tomorrow?" So it only dawned on me the next day when I realized that there was nobody around. And so I went up to Van Riebeeck Park and I said to them, "I'm going to go up the road for a scuttle." And they said, "But you can't, we're not allowed to move. They're going to arrest us." So I said, "I'm going up." And I went up and first bins I got to, there was a mattress, which was weird because it ended up in Strandfontein with us. Cut a long story short, came back with all the stuff. It was as if somebody had actually left a bag, as if somebody had had a party the day before, and all these party packs were in there. And so I thought, well, wonderful, now we can celebrate my birthday. Went back to Van Riebeeck Park, and a friend of mine and I had just gone up to the spring to get some water, and I saw the law enforcement vehicle not stop where they normally stop on the street, but actually drive up all the way to where the encampment was. And so I said to him, "We better go break down your structures, because they're going to take all your stuff," which is what we thought. They normally do that, so that's what we expected to be happening, but it wasn't. They were actually being very friendly and telling us to get onto the truck, to leave everything, as they were going to be taking us to a place of safety. Quite a number of people were fighting against it. We didn't know what was really going to happen, so we climbed on. And because we were warned, if we don't climb on, that the army would come and get us within the week. So being the good citizens that we are, we obeyed, and we climbed onto the truck and soon realized we were being taken to the Kulenburg area. At that stage, there was the Kulenburg 1, the safe space, and then there was the open space, which is now Kulenburg 2. And we were the last few tents that they had open. We were for those for our group that had just arrived. The tents were all issued by the City of Cape Town. I'm mentioning this for a specific reason. And so there were about 250 tents, two main tents, and then they also had army tents with bigger groups of guys and ladies that were separated, etc. And that became what we thought was going to be our living arrangements for the duration of lockdown. Nobody knew how long it was going to be. And I must be honest with you, nobody had a problem with the accommodation there. There were portaloos, and there were, we were allowed to go out for an hour. We used to get permission to. The camp was actually run by one of the service providers, the Haven, and then law enforcement actually had oversight over the whole camp as such. And we got permission from law enforcement. They used to give us a piece of paper every day, and you could go out for an hour or whatever it was to do what you needed to do, which was the arrangement with everybody under lockdown. And then on the Friday, or Saturday, we were visited by Hassan Khan, who's the CEO of the Haven, and he then told us about this new place that the city was going to be making available for people that lived on the streets, and he suggested that we all consider going. It was to be we were going to have a choice whether we wanted to go or not. And this would be happening the next day, which was the Sunday. So he said we'd first have lunch, and those of us that then want to move to Strandfontein could move there. He told us about hot showers and wooden floors. We had no idea where we were going to. Most people didn't even know where Strandfontein was.
So effectively, the unhoused people in Cape Town were being rounded up to one collection point to be moved to another collection.
We were rounded up to various collection points. So there were collection points at Sea Point, there were in Muizenberg, there were in town. We were the CBD one. And even in the CBD, there were other points as well, because at that stage we had the foreigners that were still in, had just been moved from the, where they were at the church, outside the church, and moved to the police station there, at Central Police Station. So there were a lot of groups available to be picked up. We had no idea that everybody from this area was going to land up at Strandfontein. And I think the public was confused, because you must understand, this I only realized afterwards, the public had always been under the impression that the people that were in the shelters were the complement of unhoused people in Cape Town. Yes. Everything under control, everybody's housed. And when Strandfontein happened, and everybody that was milling around in the streets, people that had been moved out in 2010 for the Soccer World Cup, people that had been moved out in 2017, that the public is not even aware of. There was an intervention in 2017 where unhoused people were moved into outlying areas away from Cape Town. And so all these people were now there. And suddenly the city had close on 5,000 people that had not been accounted, or that had not been discussed. And this was a shock to the public, and we were then on the Sunday, when we woke up on the Sunday, we woke up at about 7 o'clock in the morning. There was this huge ruckus going around, and we realized we'd already been encircled by luxury buses. And we were very soon made aware that this wasn't a choice. We didn't have a choice, as we had been told by Mr. Khan. We were basically corralled into these buses. People had been talking about the masks and being the safety distance. No such precautions were taken. And it was one of the eeriest rides I've ever had to take, because, homeless people that are unhoused tend to be loud, and they are always talking and making jokes, and there's always a noise going around you. And you have a bus full of unhoused people, and it was dead quiet. We had two law enforcement officers, one in front and one at the back, and they were the only ones talking, and it was eerie to me. And I think the thing was that nobody actually knew where we were on our way to, and the biggest question on everybody's lips was, how do we get back here? Because nobody expected it to be a long thing. And
2
the
weeks. We didn't know how long.
We didn't know. But as we got into Strandfontein, there was I think it's a ShopRite or Checkers on the right-hand side as a bus moved in. We saw all these people shouting, and they were shouting abuse at us, and we didn't know what was going on here. I later on got hold of a paper like a week later, and I realized that the residents of Strandfontein were not happy to have the unhoused there, and that there was going to be a court case, etc. But we didn't realize that on that Sunday that we were being moved in. And as we arrived and the bus parked, we realized, well, there's definitely something different here, because we're in the middle of nowhere, basically. That's what it looks like there. And the first thing that we picked up was immediately the amount of law enforcement officers present and security guards. And we had to line up. We were like cattle going to a slaughter. And
were these city or national? Or
no, this was law enforcement, local Cape Town law
Metro
enforcement.
Police?
Law enforcement, not the Metro, specifically the law enforcement officers, which we know from Cape Town. And then there was a security company that had obviously been appointed as well.
Which one?
I cannot remember, I must be honest with you.
Private security companies have been in the news lately.
Yeah, well, yeah, it wasn't PPA, that I can tell you, because I know them well. And so do all the unhoused. Then we were corralled again into little queues, and we were told to get rid of anything that that we were carrying with us, that we would be provided with everything we needed. So I basically walked in there with a pair of shorts and a T-shirt, which I walked out with again, despite all the donations that came in. And I was asking them, because it was going into winter, we never actually got whatever was promised on that day. We had to leave all our belongings outside the tent. And the very first question that we were asked as part of our screening was, have you ever been arrested? And by which police station? Not, have you got a cough? Have you got this?
No, not just the symptoms of...
And we were told this was a medical facility. It was going to be a medical facility so we could be safe during COVID. Yet the first question is, have you ever been arrested? Which police station? Whilst we're holding a number, because we were going to be known by numbers at Strandfontein. So it really felt to me as if I was in some movie, that I'm now some, as you see people being arrested and then holding their numbers, etc. That's how it felt.
How many buses were there?
It's difficult to say. When we arrived there, certain areas had already arrived, like Muizenberg had arrived, and we were confused. There were about 8 tents. Each of them, as you see on that, I don't know whether the public can see that, but the tents were basically marquee tents that you can, under normal circumstances, you'd have 500 people. That's before COVID, before the restrictions. Now, let me tell you, on the first night, tent number 2, where I slept, we were 608. I've got photos of where you can actually see we like sardines against each other. So there was no question that there was no... nobody can actually tell me and convince me that that was supposed to be for our benefit.
Right. Because no social distancing, that was what was happening at the time. Social distance, sanitize, wash your hands.
Yeah, and I mean, with all due respect, there were when you're talking about unhoused people, you have a lot of people with TB, you've got people with HIV, you've got, communicable diseases that we now are being exposed to, not only whatever COVID was, which we didn't even understand. So that was the first impression of it. And then to top it all, we had a death the first night. Somebody passed away on the first night, and which we became aware of like at 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, when the person's bowels had gone, etc. And, at the end of the day, we had that person lying in that heat. And, when you're in these tents, the heat becomes worse and the cold becomes even colder. So we had to go through 2 meals with that person lying in the tent. The person was collected eventually the next evening at 6 o'clock in the afternoon, which is against a lot of cultural, there were a lot of people upset by this. The other thing that was horrifying in the first night was that we were all together. So there wasn't a space for ladies that had been raped and that had got objections to lying next to males. I'll never forget the one lady, Pandiwe, that kept screaming that night. Because she just couldn't handle the fact that she was being laid next to a man when she had all these issues about being raped. It was horrible. I think the worst for me about the whole experience was the fact that they put people that were invalids, people that couldn't even help themselves to a toilet, that were supposed to be on catheters. And we had to look after them. Ultimately, we had one gentleman, John Hafke, that today is a shadow of who he used to be. He used to wash these individuals, these 14 individuals, every single day. He used to wash their bedding, he used to wash their clothes. And so when he saw what happened to these individuals afterwards, when we were brought back to, sorry, I'm going to get emotional at points here, to Cape Town, he basically lost it. I mean, I saw him the other day and he's still lost. So there were a lot of things. I remember carrying a young lady, Nandipa. She couldn't have weighed more than 25 kilograms. She had TB and she had HIV, and I had to carry her to a loo to sit her down, to things like that. It was horrific. Then we talk about washing hands. There were 20 toilets with wash basins, of which only one worked on the first day. And out of it came this brown, stinky rioolwater, soos wat mense sal sê. It was disgusting. So we had one outside tap where everybody would do everything. The ladies would wash their panties, we would brush our teeth, we would wash our plates, all at that one tap. And so eventually, I approached the person that was running it on behalf of the City of Cape Town, and I said to the individual, we are not happy with these circumstances, and it's not about the city, this is about your service providers. And I was told that I would not tell them who their service providers would be. And that's basically when we started coming together, and we formed a committee, the Strandfontein Homeless Action Committee, to represent basically tent number 2. We had we'd gotten everybody in the tent together, and we said, we're not going to accept this, we're going to stand up to what's happening here. Because to us it was a question of, I was referred to it as if it was a photo taken at an instant, which was Strandfontein. And if you look at that picture, you see everything that is wrong and with how the City of Cape Town has treated unhoused people all along. So you saw the law enforcement aspect, you saw the not caring attitude of, putting people into big dormitories without even considering what they are doing to individuals that are being put into these situations. And so our whole fight at that point in time was to better the services that were being provided to us. And eventually, gradually, they did fix a lot of those issues, like with the water. It was on our last week that they eventually put ventilation into the...
How long did that take to fix the water?
I think that, initially what happened was that when the Human Rights Commission and people were still allowed into the camp, which would have been the first 2 weeks, because after they basically banned them, we got to speak to these individuals, and I had a small cell phone, which I then utilized to send through things from Strandfontein, and that's why there was so much visuals and things happening at the camp. That we needed to get out to the press and to make them realize what was actually happening at that camp. And by the 4th week, the reports were already in by the Human Rights Commission, the head of the South African police that had been there, and everybody was criticizing the Doctors Without Borders. Everybody was criticizing the camp.
Yes, so so you are among one of the people who got this information out.
Correct.
And then on that, the Human Rights Commission investigated this.
We actually met, there were human rights monitors at the camp that we saw on a daily basis.
So the first 2 weeks they were there, and then the City of Cape Town no longer gave the investigators access to the site.
Yeah, the first to be stopped were the journalists, etc. And then there was an incident at the camp where we had requested to meet with the city. They had refused to meet with us, and we then asked to meet with the monitors. The monitors arrived, but they weren't allowed in. And we were speaking to them at the gate when a whole ruckus, happened. We wanted the monitors to come in so that we could advise them as to what we needed done, etc. We wanted to see lawyers, and they were preventing the Human Rights Commission to come in. And what happened was at one stage they had to open the gate to let some of the service providers out that had brought food in, and we basically formed a U or a horseshoe shape around the monitors and brought them into the encampment. And the minute we had that, we had rubber bullets being shot at us, and eventually we asked for the South African police to come through because we were not prepared to let the Human Rights Commission monitors out and not be sure of our safety or theirs. And so we waited until the SAPS arrived before the monitors left. The day after that, all hell had broken loose, and so the press was being told that the human rights monitors were causing trouble at Strandfontein, and they were things that really didn't happen. I mean, it was a very peaceful thing. We wanted to just bring them in so that we could talk and so that we could ask them to speak to our lawyers. We weren't even allowed to speak to the lawyers. And, when people said, it's like being in prison, then I said, it's worse than being in prison. In prison, you're allowed to speak to a lawyer. Yeah, we had to basically, when nobody was looking, run to the gate. You must understand, I saw one, after I came out, I saw a visual on YouTube of J.P. Smith and others, Councillor Badruddin, that were there and saying that nobody was forced to be there. How can you not be forced to be there when you've got
You were literally corralled into that.
We had 3 sets of fencing before you could get to the gate. It wasn't just a question of, you corralled. You were corralled, in corral. Those only disappeared after they decided to close the camp, and they notified us that they were going to close the camp and that they were going to release people, which to us then became a problem. And that is actually why we went to court. We didn't go to court as a shack on behalf of tent number 2 because we wanted to get something back, because everybody thought that that's what the homeless want to get something out of this again. That wasn't it. We had 2 things we took to court, 2 matters we took to court. The one was we didn't want anybody released that had not been quarantined and screened before they left. The reason for that is that one of our committee members was the first person to actually be found to be positive. She'd left with the Streetscapes group about a few days prior to that, and Jessie that runs Streetscapes had stopped at one of the pharmacies to have them all tested before she took them to where they were going to be staying, and her test came back positive. We knew this because she'd phoned me that night to let me know that she'd come tested positive, and she had a boyfriend in the camp, and she needed to notify him. So it was quite an emotional thing because we didn't know what this meant. And here on that same day that her positive test results came through, I was standing outside the tent or the space that they used as officials, and they got the same call through to tell them not to let people out, that one had tested positive. And on that same day, they ignored that call and they opened the gate and they let people out. And from that day, which was on the 29th of April, people were let out like in the hundreds every day. And, which was, number one, it was a frightening thing because we didn't know what was going to happen with these people. Were they positive? And we didn't want to have this. There was already a dislike for the homeless, as we saw when we came in with the Strandfontein residents. And we didn't want the whole of Cape Town thinking, if there is an suddenly there's everybody's got COVID, that it was the homeless from Strandfontein that brought this upon all of us. And so we wanted the city to act responsibly. That was the first thing. And the second thing was that we demanded that at tent number 2, we could not get the other tents involved because we were not allowed to liaise with the other tents. We were not allowed out of our encampment. So we went to court basically only for tent number 2. And tent number 2 demanded to be accommodated throughout the lockdown period as had been promised, and that the same services that we'd been promised at Strandfontein be afforded to us at wherever we were going to be accommodated. And the suggestion as to where we were going to be accommodated was made by the city. It wasn't a demand we had made. They had suggested that they were going to be building up a new Kulenburg safe space, and that would be one of the options if we chose that option. And tent number 2 chose that option. So we went to court, and the city likes to say that we didn't win the case. It wasn't a question of winning the case. The only thing that was adjusted was that where we had asked the court that all 200 and whatever individuals were on the list be quarantined and tested. The court said that only the 30 of us that were in close proximity every day to the individual was going to afford that opportunity to. And so we actually fired our lawyers based on that because we were not happy that not all 200 were going to be. And on the last day, the lawyer that we then appointed, the third lawyer that we'd appointed, the city couldn't believe that we'd actually went on. And we took it to the very last hour. I think it was at 4:30 that afternoon that the court eventually gave its ruling. And the city was instructed to provide accommodation for all the individuals on the list, but the city had said that they can only provide accommodation for 96 at Kulenburg. The others, they would have to be incorporated into other accommodation offers from other service providers. And so that was with that decision, we decided we'll get onto the buses and then leave. And so we were on our way 3 years ago we were actually not supposed to be in those buses. The committee was all supposed to have gone to the quarantine, because we had been part of the committee. But we had actually gotten ourselves into the bus, which just shows you there was absolutely no control. And so the wrong people went into quarantine, and the people, because we felt that the fact that they had not quarantined everybody, we were not taking a chance by, we felt that the committee had to be on the ground when we arrived at Kulenburg. And we had been told by the city that it would take 11 days before they could accommodate us inside Kulenburg, because there was a problem with the water pumps or something.
There was no problem with like the Brakwater and one tap.
No, but there was at Kulenburg. And to be honest with you, I think that they had hoped that typical homeless people, they're going to get tired of this. Once in town, they're going to see the dealers and they're going to see everything, and they're just going to disappear. We had no intention of disappearing. And it took us another 2 months to actually get them to allow the 96 into Kulenburg, but we persisted. Other people got involved, and that takes us to another story. So that is how we got back into town. What is very important to note, however, is that we've got all the encampment evictions going on at the moment, and I think I want the city to remember where those people come from. If they go and have a look at their mattresses and some of their tents, they'll recognize them as city issues that they got given at Strandfontein. So offers were made, where would you like to be dropped off? And people made their list of where they wanted to be dropped off. And these are the people that are now have started these encampments. And where the encampments started was through the people that they could not accommodate after Strandfontein, that they let out and that they drove to these areas all around Cape Town. And so they have a responsibility there as well, rather than call out eviction to where I would still say.
We're going to talk about the eventual move by the city to evict the unhoused from places that they themselves put it in. But before we leave Strandfontein, the city's response to the Human Rights Commission report is to basically just open the gates and pretend that this thing sort of didn't happen, to just let it go away as quickly as possible. What did the Human Rights Commission report find?
The Human Rights Commission report was basically that it was, it was against all. They came very close to calling it a concentration camp. I think some people even did. There really was. It was a human rights violations left, right, in any aspect that you could think of. If you think you've got almost 2,000 people, you have got one medical doctor, you've got 13 nurses, and you've got 350 law enforcement officers. The way that, if somebody became ill, we had to go through a whole string of levels of people to actually get an ambulance there. We had people that were attacked by law enforcement officers that they refused to take for J88, for example, said we wouldn't be able to lay charges. Things like that were happening that I think not even the officials knew. To a large degree, we ended up with Dr. Badruddin, that was the Maker member at that stage for social development. He and I were seen as the two arch rivals of that year. One of the radio stations voted us arch rivals of the year because we were calling each other liars. We really didn't have much time for each other. And then we had to start talking to each other when it came to actually negotiating, getting people into Kulenburg. And we actually, I must be honest with you, I ended up working exceptionally well with Dr. Badruddin, and to this day have a very good relationship with him. And it was due to the fact that the information that was being fed to the politicians as such, they were taking as being what it was. And they hadn't seen what it was. They hadn't, and that I took exception to. You can't call me a liar if you haven't seen what you're talking about. I, on the other hand, can prove to you that, this is what was happening there. So luckily it wasn't long. It's one of those episodes in my life where I think to myself, could it really have only been 6 weeks? Because it feels like 60 years. It really felt so long. This whole period, when you say to me, okay, it's 3 years now, and you think, so long ago. And then I think of everything that has happened in the 3 years, and I think, no, it can't be, it must be about 10. Because a lot has happened. Let me be honest with you. So much has happened, not all of it good. a lot of good and a lot of bad, a lot of disappointments. You mentioned the Human Rights Commission. One of the biggest disappointments to me has been the Human Rights Commission that was so involved there. But I've learned, there are a lot of agencies and a lot of organizations that do a lot of things. And yeah, I'll give the city their due in the fact that they said, even during Strandfontein, that a lot of the individuals that were involved with the Human Rights Commission, not so much the Commission, but the individuals, that they had their own political motives. And I am here to bear that out. Without a doubt, they had their own political motives. And it came to bear on us in a negative way, in a very, very negative way. We've been through the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. And the lowest of lows have been caused by organizations and people that were meant to help us.
So after all this, after the 6 weeks, the SIU investigation finds that this encampment cost 42 million rand. I think I sent you the link to that. So 42 million rand for 6 weeks.
No, you got that wrong. It's 48 million for the tents alone, the hire of the tents.
So even more.
Much more.
48 million rand just for tents.
For tents.
Somebody ate very well of that tent.
And let me tell you, if you look at the housing or the accommodation of homeless people as it is at the moment, and unhoused people, and the wastage that went there. And that is what I can't understand, is that although there's been a report, although there's been an investigation, there hasn't been any kind of response. And I'm always asked, but what kind of response do you want? Recognition that this was, never mind what it was, but it really was the amount of trauma that it's caused, the amount of people are still suffering because of it. I mean, people are still being evicted to nowhere because of this camp, and all because and to this day, a lot of people defending the city move to do this encampment will still say that the masses that we now have on the street are because COVID brought so many people new people onto the street. Now, COVID definitely had an impact, but if I tell you that most of them were there already, these were people that were hiding in mountains, in the drains, down the cliffs, because we had such a punitive response to people living on the streets. We used to hide. I mean, I used to live on the mountain, and you'd never ever find the place that I had on the mountain. It was so well hidden. So as long as the people from what are they called? The Mounties. I can't remember their name now. But in any case, the people.
The mounted police.
The mounted police.
Yes.
I mean, as long as you paid them in kind, as to if you scuttled a watch or you scuttled a cell phone, you just had to have your monthly payment ready. They'd leave you where you were on the mountain.
So, Carlos, I just want to talk, because you are speaking from assumed knowledge. Obviously, the city of Cape Town and governments in general try to keep the unhoused out of sight, out of mind, out of the public eye. So, can you tell me a little bit about, there's some communities of unhoused on the mountain, there's some communities in the drains. What, generally, sort of speaking, what are these different?
Well, prior to Strandfontein, there were either you would be out in the open and take your chances, like I did when I had my stall on the parade, to be near my stall. Otherwise, you'd go up on the mountain because it's safer if you are able to keep the Mounties happy. The mountain has basically different levels. So right on top of the top level will be your rastas that trade in herbs, etc., but that are also basically unhoused. Coming down slightly further down, and it's not people tend to ask me a lot, is this apartheid on the mountain? No, it's not apartheid, it's a cultural thing. The next level is more your ZCC and the African religious cult type of groupings that you get that are on the mountain. They're not necessarily homeless, but they are away from home, and so they settle on the mountain because that's where they have their meetings and they have their rituals, etc. And further down, you'll get at the base, but not where you get the general South African, usually led, and I don't want to go color here because it's a mess. I mean, that's where I used to say, whether you're white, whether you're African, whether you're colored, you have your South African, but there was definitely a distinction between the foreigner contingent. The foreigner contingent was definitely separate to the South African contingent and has always been and still is. Even today, if you go to up on the deck, and you go out. You've got Stickenderhuis, which is that broken down section of the
Of the
station.
blockhouse, yeah.
Where I also stayed in, and on the direct opposite side, you'll find that all the bridges, we're doing a count at the moment, and one of the biggest growths has been the people that are living under bridges, on the side of bridges, anywhere where, because obviously it's more difficult for law enforcement to police those areas, in very dangerous spots actually. But those numbers have grown. I mean, it's like in the CBD, I think we're looking at 3,000 odd people that are living on bridges, below bridges, along the bridges. It's horrific. But with Strandfontein, what happened with COVID, not Strandfontein, was that people could not afford to stay in the drains or in the mountain or down the cliffs because they needed food. They weren't able to scuttle. So a lot of those people then came out and centered themselves around areas where they were being serviced by NGOs and all the organizations that rose up during COVID to help the unhoused. And so remember that not everybody landed up in Strandfontein, because once they realized what the public outcry was, they stopped bringing to Strandfontein. And so a lot of areas had people still living, hence the fact that we had people feeding in Sea Point where the Wagenaarskaal was torched, etc. Those things, those were people that never made it to Strandfontein. After, I think they stopped at about 1,800, they decided, although they were still building, and the week that we were told the camp was about to close, they were still building the office block for the officials. So they had no intention of closing it at that point, had it not been for not only the Human Rights Commission case, but they had, what actually closed the camp was their agreement with the Strandfontein homeowners, because their court case came up on the 29th, and we were notified on the 29th of the decision, because they had obviously come to an agreement with the Strandfontein homeowners that they would close the camp.
So they didn't bend the knee to what is ethical and right. They bent the knee to
without
the
a
landed class.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. It had nothing to do with the Human Rights Commission.
See, I can understand the logic of the city of Cape Town wanting to make sure that, as you said, from a humanitarian point of view, there's nothing to scuttle in COVID. So let's actually, make sure that at least the most vulnerable are safe. But then it took a left turn and went straight into human rights violations.
This is the thing. If you go to what I'm currently suggesting to the city, with the crisis that we have at the moment, some people are going to think I'm mad because they're going to say, but you complained about Strandfontein. Now, I'm not suggesting a Strandfontein. I am suggesting something which is, if they had just, I would not have had a problem, and I don't think anybody that was unhoused would have had a problem, had it continued the way it was under Kulenburg Bridge, with those 200 odd tents. It was clean, it was hygienic, there was no problem. We were allowed out when other people were allowed out. In Strandfontein, you didn't have that luxury. If it came to the end of the month and people needed to go and draw their grant or whatever, you just weren't allowed to. I mean, we had people that were diabetic that needed to get special cookies or whatever for their sugar, and they weren't allowed to do these things. So you're putting people's health at risk. And then you have a huge fight about it and a huge argument about something that is basic, that everybody else is being allowed to do.
So the city of Cape Town also has historically ran this campaign, don't give to the unhoused, or what they actually don't give to homeless. You got to give responsibly, give to shelters and NGOs and NPOs. So so the ordinary person on the street, well, I would say the person who's not exposed to the unhoused would say, well, why can't you stay in a homeless shelter then?
I'm trying to figure this out, because I don't think anybody can be this dumb. Really, I know a lot of DA politicians that I like, that I can get on with and I work with. I really do, and people know that. I mean, whether it be Nicola Jowl, be it Ian McMahon, there are people that I really can work with, so I know they're good people. And there are people in the city that are good people. And we keep saying the city. What do we mean by the city? The city has got the politicians that have gotten very vocal, and this is where I think they should be a little careful. And then you've got the administrative side of things, where you've got a department that actually, once they know who the party is, I mean, they're supposed to be apolitical. If the ANC is in power, their policies have to reflect ANC policy, and that is how their strategy works. So I think somewhere along the line, things are getting a little messed up. And I think maybe it's individuals that have made wrong decisions, and people have just gone with it because they believe it's working and they haven't really checked. The Give Responsibly campaign is a campaign that used to be, it was originated by the CCID. It used to work exceptionally well. It used to be the public used to pay into that fund, and it used to be every year different organizations would be given portions of that money, organizations that worked with unhoused people. It became very popular, and it was actually usurped by the City of Cape Town. It became so big that the city decided to take over the campaign. Unfortunately, it's not the same campaign anymore. The Give Responsibly campaign at the moment basically says to you that you must give, anybody that wants to donate must give towards this campaign. How does that money get distributed? Let me tell you, the very first distribution of that money, and this campaign has been running now for about 10 years. The first disbursement of that money was done this year, announced this year, after there was questions as to what is happening with this fund. And the total, I think, is 70,000 Rand.
70,000 Rand.
I think that is.
So you say about 7,000 unhoused and homeless, that works out to around about 10.
And the conditions that were set to where this money was going to go at this meeting that was held this year when this was brought up is that it will go to organizations that want to use it for a building of a step or whatever at a shelter. It was not going to go anywhere else but to those. But in general, when they advertised the fund, and the reason why there was such a hoo-ha about that as well was that the money at the moment, as you pay the money into that SnapScan, the SnapScan is registered to the Haven Night Shelter, not even to the City of Cape Town. It's been explained to us that it is, the Haven had the SnapScan available, and so it offered it to the city to utilize. But it's not good enough for me as an NGO or anybody else to have this NGO that's, why should the public pay into an NGO's account that's supposed to be shared amongst everybody?
But why is that? Why aren't they doing good?
And so, why the Haven?
Yeah.
Well, I think the one thing that's happened with the Strandfontein situation and the whole discussion around Unhoused, etc., is that the Haven, being the biggest supplier of bed spaces, and it doesn't amount to much. It amounts to 7% of all of the total of homeless people that are unhoused. They are able to accommodate. They've got, I think, 900 beds. The problem there has been the thing that I've challenged them on has always been you get funded for the beds by the provincial government, per bed, per night, every night, for the beds you have. Then you take mostly, I think 60 to 70% of their residents are the grant recipients, basically the elderly, the disabled. And so they charge them per month, per bed. So that's already twice that they're getting funded for that.
They're double dipping.
Then they've got a campaign that runs with the public. Pay 70 Rand a week for a bed and you can get somebody onto that. It's not. And as I said to them, and then they said to me, yeah, but they've got other costs. I said, then tell the public what those costs are, because at the moment you create an impression that the public, if they buy that bed for the week, if they see somebody on the street, they can take that person to the Haven, that person is going to get accommodated. It doesn't work that way. The Haven is usually full because they have got permanent clients, which are the disabled and the elderly. And so they've actually created a bottleneck, so people can't really get into the Haven because it's always full. And it's always full, not of people that are, to me, a night shelter, a safe space. These are, by definition, temporary and emergency accommodation. If you just come into homelessness and you fall into homelessness at night, you can pick up a phone and you get people into a shelter. That's unfortunately not the service they're providing. It's become a service where it's become cheap accommodation for those that can't afford to pay anywhere else, like the elderly, etc. If we take the number of people living on the streets currently, and you take away the disabled, the elderly, and the people that have got challenges, mental health challenges, then you're taking away over 50% of the people that we think we have to accommodate at the moment in Cape Town. And quite frankly, I don't blame the city for that. I blame the fact that the national government, the city of Cape Town, I'll give due is due. At least the city of Cape Town was the very first and is still one of the few that has got a policy on homelessness, unhoused people. our national government that has got a preamble to a constitution that is lauded the world over and that talks to basic human rights and the vulnerable, and how in 30 years haven't managed to come up with a policy on those living on the streets unsheltered. And then I have to think, how? So not only that, they've closed old age homes and, facilities where people could be housed. When they closed up the mental institutions, they didn't say that you don't have to replace it with something else. There's a big difference between a mental institution and what we are suggesting for somebody that has got mental health challenges. But you cannot have them be considered as homeless or unhoused. That is not what defines them. The state of their mental state is what's defining them at this point in time, and that has to be addressed. Like the elderly, they need a place where they can relax and where they can actually enjoy the last years that they have on this earth. We are putting them in dormitories with 100 other people, where gangster rituals are being partaken in during the night, and they just have to, they're so desperate for that little bed that they're paying for that they keep quiet. Nobody boos or bars when these things are happening. And so, to me, the whole system, if the system was working, if we were looking after that 50%, then it would make it easier for the other 50% to be looked after by, the NGOs, and they would know exactly who they are actually providing services for. Nobody even knows how many unhoused people there are in Cape Town. The last count by the city says there are 4,000 and something. The national minister says that we have got 4,200 and something in Cape Town. That includes the people in the shelters, and 700 in total in the CBD of the in Cape Town. Now, we did a count. We started in December, and we have counted 7,011 head count of everybody in the CBD, not Cape Town, CBD. So this is 10 times the amount that they're saying. So we have to look at this. Why are you not responding to a call to actually count and assess the people living on the streets? So that it doesn't help the mayor comes and says another 10 million, another 20 million, another 100 million. Towards what? If you do not know what services are required, if you do not know the journey that those people have taken, what got them onto the street, what journey did they travel, and what will it take to get that person off the street, then you are wasting money. Just opening up safe spaces, I can guarantee you, it's not that it's a waste of money, because you always get the elderly taking up those spaces. Without a doubt, there's enough elderly that need accommodation that are going to take up those spaces. So I'm not saying that there isn't a place for the safe space. There is. But the mayor has now changed it and is now calling it the transitional safe spaces. That came with all the lawsuits they've had to deal with from Ndipuni Ukwazi, where they've been using the word transitional, which relates to more so the type of accommodation we were offering at the houses that we opened as homeless individuals, where you actually are transitional, where somebody's got a key to a room and they've got a private room and they are in transition to actually getting into independent accommodation. And they're calling their safe spaces transitional. That is not transitional. If you need to know what transitional is, you have to go to the homeless and find out what is their understanding of transitional. People always wonder or say, but the homeless are ungrateful and look, they don't want to accept. First and foremost, let's understand that this perception that the homeless must be happy, only too grateful to come off the streets because now they've got a roof over their heads and they've got a bed. You don't know what is going under that roof. You don't know the conditions that they're under. So do not assume that they don't have reasons for not wanting to be in those shelters. There are a great many reasons. Be it, we keep recognizing the fact that COVID's had an impact on people's lives and that there are the new homeless. Those people are families. Not one shelter in Cape Town offers accommodation for families. So where must they go? Through the gender-based violence, we luckily have a group of women's shelters that take in children as well under the women's shelter movement. But the city shelters and the havens, etc., don't take women and children. And so when those women's shelters, which are only a handful of them under women's shelter movement, where do they go? Where did his mothers and children go? Irrespective of the fact that the father can't even come close to them. People unhoused people tend to be very, very close to their animals, and they usually have a dog or for protection. Most of them, I see these days, have pit bulls because they know people are scared, despite the fact that those pit bulls are so easy to. They've got the nicest personalities, those that are with the unhoused, but people are scared of them. So for their own protection, they have these animals, and you cannot separate an animal from. You just won't do
By
it.
law, in fact, as well.
Quite frankly, let me tell you, they won't move. They would rather go be threatened with prison or whatever. They won't leave their animals. So there you've got something else. And this is something that is, why? You know, why? There's no law that says they can't have an animal.
In fact, there are often these do-gooders who try their best to confiscate the animals from owners because, you know, they don't understand that you can be unhoused and take better care of an animal than, and these are companions both for safety and for emotional purposes. Neighborhood watch groups are very famous for taking away the.
You know, the one house that I opened is in Observatory, and I rescued a little puppy a year and a few months ago. On the deck, two guys were selling him, and they'd thrown him into tar, and he really was full of fleas. He must have been. The vet told me he was 5 weeks old. He was a tiny little thing. But a pit bull. But I thought he was going to be blind or he wouldn't be able to hear. He really looked as if he'd been through the mill. But slowly but surely, he was a very slow developer, but slowly but surely, he turned into the most beautiful dog that you can imagine and the most wonderful, wonderful companion. And I actually bought them off of them because, number one, I wanted to rescue the dog. And number two, I know that animals have a good impact on people that are going through what people in the house were going through, trying to sort out their lives. And so when I sort of moved away from the house and started my consultancy, they begged me not to take the dog, and so I left the dog. And Cow has become a celebrity in Observatory. Everybody knows Cow, and it's just a celebrity dog. And recently there was an issue with Cow where one of the organizations actually, or somebody involved took Cow to be breeded, which is against the law. I wasn't aware of this. And to cut a long story short, he came back with parvo, which is life-threatening. And so everybody, I was being told to prepare myself, the dog was going to not make it, etc. But they don't know Cow was going to make it. But such a hoo-ha broke out about this puppy. And because he'd lost weight, etc., he was being walked down the street one day by one of the guys, the residents at the house. And he'd also just been fixed because he was becoming very, very amorous with all the ladies. And so he wasn't well. And they don't cut your testicles anymore. They inject something in and then they shrink. But they swell first. And so this lady stopped with the puppy being walked towards, I think it was to one of the other organizations, or actually to the vet. And she was so freaked out that she took this dog and the guy that was with the dog, took him to a vet in Sea Point. And the next thing I knew, I had this huge, big drama. She wanted to adopt the dog, and the dog is going to die. And I could not believe. Luckily, the SPCA that handled the whole situation was the dog, and one of the ladies that actually works for the council in Observatory that has her own organization for pets climbed in and said, you know what, we know these people, we know how they care about the dog. But she really went ballistic. She was like threatening everybody, and she made such an issue of this, and all because it was homeless people.
Yes, I think that's an attitude about people that saying the homeless aren't capable, or unhoused, and also the approach of the city rather criminalizing the homeless than uplifting it. But you said something very interesting. I want to talk about you said it's like gang rituals in night shelters, you know. So before we get to that, I want to talk about the different types of people who end up who are experiencing being unhoused, experiencing homelessness. You know, there are people who have substance abuse problems, and that drives them out. What are the other kinds of social and societal pressures that drives them towards being unhoused? Because I want people to get an idea of the mix of people that are in this community, and more specifically within the shelters?
Okay, as I name them, I want people to think and understand that these are all people that have been ostracized by us, society. And so for us to say we have nothing to do with it, think about that when I mention these groupings. We've already mentioned the elderly, the disabled, those with mental challenges.
How do the elderly end up in a homeless shelter?
Most of them, and you'll find that there's much less African elderly people in the shelters. That is because culturally, African communities tend to look after the elderly. It's become a sad reality in white communities, mostly, and among some colored communities as well, and families where the families become too big and they're not able to look after everybody. And usually the youngest child or the eldest child ends up scuttling on the streets and making a life for themselves, or the elderly, especially if the elderly become difficult, etc. So they become rejected. And it's easier to put people into a shelter. Same with the disabled. This disabled also means or whether you want to see them there or the people with mental health issues. For example, ladies in shelters, most of them are psychiatric patients. They're people that are on antidepressants and families can't handle it, and so they put them into shelters. So these are all rejections by families. Then let's go to the rest of the people on the streets, the drug addicts, the people with addictions that came onto the street with addictions. There are many people, and this is unfortunately the reality of it, that don't come onto the street with addictions, but leave the street with addictions. But those that come with addictions are obviously people that have been rejected for whatever reasons by their families as well, and communities. The biggest growth is amongst the the LGBTQI youth community, and that very much is the African community that is rejecting there. And we see that in the growth. It's been astronomical. Then we've got people that our state institutions put out there. People that come out of a rehab get put onto the street. People that come out of prison get put onto the street. People that come out of a mental institution get put onto the street. These people are not even, the most popular thing for a social worker in these institutions is to call up a shelter and say, have you got space? If you haven't got space, they let them out and they go onto the street. So we are putting people on the street. Everybody that lives, that is unhoused, comes from a social rejection situation. And that is why when they form encampments, we keep talking about how dirty it looks and how the needles are lying. It will be antisocial. If you look at anything in the world, I mean, if you're going to ostracize somebody from that community, they will form community. We as human beings need some kind of belonging, sense of belonging somewhere. And if we find that belonging, and it happens to be away from what your normal society would be, then you're going to be anti that society. And the more it criminalizes us and the more it pushes us down, the more we're going to react to it. A lot of people, I know myself and a lot of the people that I know, even more important to us than having been housed was just to get recognition from people that were housed, and for things that we did that were good. When I just came into homelessness about 10 years ago now, when I landed up on the streets of Sea Point, there was still that symbiotic relationship where we actually looked after each other. We would tell the people in the street that we would sleep if there was a foreign element coming into the street or a criminal element, and they would let the police know, etc. And so we made sure that it was safe for them and for us, because people think that it's unsafe for them in their homes. What about us that sleep on the street and that we might have nothing according to what the public thinks that compared to what they have in their homes, but to us what we have is precious. And our lives. I mean, a lot of people on the streets, that's why if you look at when encampments really started, or people congregating together that slept on the streets, which is the very first place they'll go and sleep outside of? A police station. Why? Protection. It's their safety. The fact that we've got criminals living amongst, and when I say criminals, it's not to say that there are no criminals that are unhoused. There are. But a lot of the people that are living as unhoused and identify as criminals are actually more so criminals, and their identity is crime rather than being unhoused. Some of them have got homes. But we have made it easy for them to infiltrate unhoused communities because we treat everybody the same. So you are homeless. And so it's easy to come into this fold and nobody's checking. It's not as if the police are coming there with their morph and touch and saying, nobody's doing that, which they could be doing. They come and they break down the whole structure, they break down the whole camp. And so the criminals know. It's okay, we're part of the, and they get known as part of the unhoused community, and so they get away with the murder that they commit. Not that it's murder, but I mean the crime that they commit. So that's basically.
So you alluded to night shelters being used to recruit gangsters. How does this work, and how does the political economy of a night shelter work, from gatekeepers to criminal activities to how do people interface with that?
In exactly the same way that it works at Paulsmoor, the shelters, most of the shelters, at least the ones that I've been at, and I've been at most, as well as the state rehabilitation centers, work in exactly the same way. They are controlled, and by whoever the highest ranking person from either 26, 27 or 28, usually 27 or 28, will control they will not necessarily be the appointed person. There will be a facade appointed person, a person that they can buy over with drugs. We think that just because somebody's running a shelter, they're not doing drugs. Please. They were bringing them into Strandfontein, and that was the start of the haven. So to them, it's an economy. And so they usually have a front person, and the orders are coming from whoever it is that's actually running the shelter, and they call it running the shelter because even sometimes the management is compromised. So basically, when it's lights out, anything goes, and that's where people's belongings get taken. When there are certain rituals that happen where, with initiations or where people have done something wrong, etc. You always know it by the knock of a stick on the floor, and how many ever times it's going to be knocked that night, and put your head that cushion, and you just don't hear anything whilst it's happening. But I've got a community chat going on at the moment, and one of the NGOs there was talking to me about one of the guys that she's had to now help through a situation that happened at the Haven where he was raped. And I said to her, thank heavens you also mentioning it, because when I mention it, people always say, another homeless person talking about this nonsense that doesn't really happen. It happens. I've experienced it. It happens. It's not as if it's just, things that people talk about. It is a very, very serious thing that happens, and there's nowhere you can go, because ultimately, what is a night shelter? A night shelter is a place that you can go into from 6 in the evening till 7 in the morning. The rest of the 12 hours in between, you are on the streets. So you're not home, really. And so anything can happen to you when you get out of there if you are going to, report any of these things happening, etc. And we very quickly learned that reporting, be it law enforcement or being a reporting organization, etc., doesn't get you anywhere. And that is why expectations are that, the unhoused will walk away from a situation and, they can carry on as they've been doing before. It's a sad state of affairs, but unfortunately it's something that is historical, it's there, and we have to deal with it, and people have to confront it and realize that it's happening.
So that's why the few availabilities that if you get into a night shelter, you have to, there are dangers that are inherent in that as well, which is why some of the unhoused would prefer to live on the street or on the mountain or wherever that may be.
If somebody finds out, say for example, you've done somebody wrong in the hierarchy of gangsterism, or you've left the gang, or there's something you owe for drugs, and they find out that you're at the shelter, they will move somebody in there as if that person is homeless in order to get to you. So it's not as if there isn't some criminal. Unfortunately, it is, we are dealing with, and some people say, yeah, that shows you what type of person you're dealing with. No, there are a lot of innocent people that have nothing to do with this, but you are exposed to it. And if you say anything, you become part of it, because next thing you know, you'll be the one being raped. So it's not as if, I'm tired that everything is clandestine and everybody's making as if everything's so hunky-dory. It's not. You know, you have to understand why people say no. It's like the fact that, you know, you've only got a certain time. With a shelter, you've got 3. It used to be 3 since we started bringing it up and making an issue, but some of them have changed it to 6 months. But they give you 3 months to get your life in order, and then you're back on the street. And that is our biggest concern when the bylaws were changed, is how can you be telling people on the street that they're going to be arrested if they don't accept accommodation that you offer, but after 3 months, you put that same person back on the street. That night, they're going to be arrested again because what are you doing? You know, because there's no logic to the way that it's working at the moment. You can't have, and I agree, the mandate from the provincial government that actually pays, or the funds that come from national government get given to provincial government, which is then dispersed to the organizations. The city is actually not meant to be involved. There's no mandate there, but by sheer fact that they got involved and that they started doing things like opening up the safe spaces,
At
etc.
facility level.
Unfortunately, they have made it their business because now they've used ratepayers' money to invest in these systems. So they can no longer say, it's not our mandate. They made it their mandate. So now they have to be criticized when they do something wrong, and they have to be applauded when they do something right. But unfortunately, with the way that the money situation comes, when the provincial government gives you funds and you are a night shelter, one of the conditions is that you can only keep the person there for 3 months or whatever it is. So it's not the shelter that's making that decision. It's actually part and parcel of the white paper on homelessness that the provincial government bases their norms and standards for shelters. So this is a norm and standard for a shelter, and I agree with it. But then you have to have other types of accommodation. Because where do you go after those 3 months? You can't put people back on the street. You can't be spending so much money to get people off the street to put them back on.
Well, that makes sense to me from the city's point of view, in terms of there's a network, or rather an ecosystem of service providers and departments and maybe individuals creating the circle of off the street, in rehab, on the street, and all the way these grants are being dispersed and, you know, the gears are being oiled.
Unfortunately, you know, the funding is such that if I look at the funding, if I look at the organizations and how funding works at the moment, it's very, very unsettling, because it's as if people are applying or people are providing services as per the funding that is available. They're not looking at the individuals and what they need. It's if that person decides that's the type of funding, that's the type of thing that we want to do, and that's the money that we're going to be offering, an organization will change its mission and its vision suddenly overnight in order to get that funding. And so they all seem to be running for the same type of funding, and in the meantime, no services are being offered to the individual. So what is the point? Or they programs that will benefit 100 people maximum for a period of 3 years, whereas it was meant to impacted on 1,000 people. You know, so it's totally not something that I can understand. The safe spaces will say to you, but they do provide opportunity for, the mayor always says it in his statements, they do provide opportunities for work, and the safe spaces do. They are the first to get the opportunity to join the EPWP programs. But what are EPWP programs? A period of 3 months, you get employment. And then after those 3 months, you are disqualified for 3 months. You can't work on an EPWP program. So what have you actually achieved? Because you've risen that person's, but there's no way that in 3 months anybody can move from having nothing at a shelter to moving into independent, you go and take a flat, or, I mean, we know that is not possible. So then you keep them out of the job market for 3 months. And then they can apply again. So all you're doing is perpetually keeping people in this imprisonment of, that is why people don't want to go to shelters. People that are chronically homeless, or people that have been on the street for 10, 12 years, they've been through that mill. They've been through, oh gosh, yeah, again, you go in now, 3 months later you have to go and look for another shelter. You go to do the same thing at another shelter. And if you keep yourself, you know, active that way, you can move through the whole of Cape Town shelters and then start back at point number 1. But that's all you do. And you get to that point that you think, but why am I doing this? Because if I go and scuttle or do whatever, I can, you know, move further ahead with, they definitely have more. Let me tell you, people that are not living in shelters probably have more available to them to actually live a life than people that are living in shelters.
What percentage of the unhoused have interactions or end up in prison, in Paulsmoor prison, do you estimate?
I don't think there's, there might be 15% that haven't made it there yet, because there really is. Let me tell you, my first arrest, and I had 7 of them, was for pushing a trolley, a 3-wheel trolley that I actually had permission for from Pick and Pay. But I didn't have the permission slip with me. So every Friday, they'd wait for me at exactly the right corner where they knew I was coming down from my scuttle, and they arrested me 7 weeks in a row for that trolley. And so eventually the magistrate at the community court said to me, Mr. Mesquita, do you think that the Sea Point police station is arresting you by any chance? I said, well, ma'am, it's for you to decide. And she actually gave me a letter where I had to go and claim my trolley back. And if they didn't give me my trolley back, she would want them in court and face her. And so they never ever arrested me again for a trolley. But other people would have gotten arrested. So this was a trolley they'd written off wire trolleys, they'd replaced them with plastic trolleys, and had a wheel missing. So the manager, when I asked him if I could have it, he said yes. I said, can I please have a letter because they're going to stop me? But I never had it with me. I mean, the last thing I'm thinking about on a Friday morning is I'm going to take my letter with me. And Strasbourg, for 7 weeks in a row, they would arrest me.
And what's your first experience with prison? I mean, we remember where we started out. You are a music producer living on the Atlantic seaboard.
I've dealt with these issues. I can talk about them now. I mean, I was raped in prison, so it wasn't as if and with a stick, so it's not something that is pleasant. And I went into court still bleeding, and I mean, the magistrate actually realized something was wrong with me and sent me to the whole story that you go through with your being tested as to what had happened, etc. So that happens because of a stupid, I was awaiting trial for, I don't even know what it was at that time. I think it was, it was actually suspicion of stolen goods, and that was because somebody had given me a blanket, which I didn't have a receipt for. And so you end up there because they do stop you, especially over Christmas, people give you things. There are people that are very, very generous. I've had people stop me on the street and give me 300 Rand or 400 Rand, so there are generous people, and if you're walking around with something that's new and you don't have a receipt for it, believe me, you'll get arrested for suspicion of stolen goods. That's the trolley issue as well. That's what they arrest you for. And you end up ruining somebody's lives because, I had been through it before and I was the age that I was, but you send kids in there, you send youngsters in there whose lives get destroyed.
So, look, that's really, it's a persecution of a class of people. By a particular class of people, a political class of people. Now, there was, you've made many friends, but you've also made some powerful enemies. And there was a story, a really bizarre story, that a hit list was circulated with your name at the very top of this hit list. Allegedly a hit list. I have to obviously say that.
Yeah, that was a very strange situation because my response to that was typical of me again.
So let's talk about Rob Hersov because he's the guy that allegedly circulated this hit list.
Yeah, he distanced himself from it eventually. I don't know how he managed to make that statement because, it was obvious. We all saw the thread of the message. But, I was just so thrilled to be in the company that I was in. The people that I was put in there were people that I admire. People like Lucy Valerie Gay and people like Brett Heron. I can't even remember their names now. But, I was really in good company. Issa Jacobson and Herman Lautergan. And I was this little homeless individual that happened to make the top of that list. It was very real. I had been asked by the Good Party to stand for them as their candidate in Sea Point, and he was supporting a candidate from the Freedom Front, and so that is how it happened. So I was an enemy of the state.
This thing ends up with a car being burnt out with this hit list. Let's see. Let's read this. The list details a number of people who are described as, quote, undeniably nasty, unquote, and, quote, low-grade leftist punk and weasel. The image which you speak of was sent to DA Councillor Nicola Drall and DA Deputy Shadow Minister of Employment Labour Michael Bagram. The mail goes on to suggest we should focus our energy on unseating the ANC as well as rising up against the EFF. Remember, this is rising up against the EFF in Ward 54, which is the Sea Point, the Atlantic Seaboard.
Correct.
You cannot get like a less ANC or EFF war than that.
Even
Although the EFF won the Robben Island VD, but maybe they were defending against that.
Even I that came in, I wanted to really elevate the homeless issue when I agreed to the nomination for standing as councillor. And even I was absolutely not much campaigning, except for the fact that I had a high profile in social media at that stage, beat the EFF and the ANC and everybody else that was in the running except for Nicola Jal. So, but it was, I was called the sewer rat. They actually went and they changed my whole campaign poster, which is illegal, on social media and called me not so good. And the things they called me was just abysmal. And the Freedom Front, when we complained about it to the political party, just ignored it completely.
Yeah. So this list is like actually comical if it wouldn't come from somebody with the means.
Yeah.
And
the fact that we'd had the Wagenaar's car had already been blown up.
What's the story behind the car?
Well, the car, nobody's ever been able to point directly, although it's widely suspected that it was the work of somebody. Well, I have to say the name because it's on there in any case. Paul Jacobson, that now is a councillor, provisional, or I call them provisional. What is councillors that weren't voted in, but by
proportional
representation councillor, and threats had been made, and one day they looked out the window and the car was ablaze. They had been told not to. They'd gotten the police to tell them to move away, not do it in the Sea Point. And that happened. The other thing is that the other person that's on there is Karen Goodkin.
Yeah.
And Karen Goodkin's walls were defaced in Sea Point as well. So a lot of the people in the list, Lucy Valerie Graham, that poor woman was put through hell and back. She actually won her case against Paul Jacobson recently. But he put her really through hell. There's another lady that lost her child through this whole thing. So it was frightening on the one hand, but I wasn't going to take it, to that lane because it would have destroyed me. And strangely enough, Leslie warned me. She said to me, Cuddles, block all these people. Don't even allow them into your Facebook page. And I said to Leslie, I'm not going to live my life that way. I'm just not that type of person. To this day, I don't have one block on my page. People can say whatever they like. I try, and quite frankly, I've got one gentleman that used to be, I would say, the number 2 person after Paul Jacobson that really hated anything to do with homeless people. And I've managed to get him onto my side, and he's now a big supporter of mine. So patience does sometimes work, and you're taking them through the process has proven to me to be effective. I actually had somebody ask me on Twitter the other day as well, Cuddles, why do you even entertain somebody like that? And I say, you know what, you never know. And I feel that I owe people that explanation so that they know. Because I know that there hasn't ever been that other side being told. It's always been whatever's been proclaimed is what has been believed. And it's necessary to hear the other side. I don't say people have to believe me, but they can go and test me. They can go and test everything I say. To this day, in 3 years, I haven't been proven, to have said anything that is not valid or that I have to retract, because I won't. I speak to my lived experience and to the truth that I know I lived and am living.
Yeah. Just to put a point on the Rob Hersov thing, people think that he's this genius entrepreneur, but actually much like Elon Musk, he's a wealth whose wealth was built on an apartheid privilege and an emerald mine. Rob Hersov's father, Basil Hersov, actually was one of the people who ate the most from the arms deal that Patricia de Lille exposed. So, these people are not entrepreneurs. They're actually a little bit something wrong with them. And I have to say that I'm never satisfied doing a podcast without that disclaimer. All views here are like, I don't...
If I hear somebody's name, I have to put it as... is this Brakan Suez? Ooh.
Yeah, just put the... I play a drinking game with that when I rewatch my podcast. Every time that disclaimer comes up, I take a shot. Speaking of taking a shot, Carlos, there's a bit more than that. There's a link. You were on Lester Kiewit's show today on Cape Talk, and you outlined why TIC is a drug of choice for the unhoused. Can you just tell our viewers and listeners about that?
Okay, basically TIC is our version, our very watered-down version of crystal methamphetamine. Crystal methamphetamine actually medicinally gets used to help people that have a sleeping disorder that, for example, they just fall asleep at any time. They'll be speaking to you falling asleep.
Narcoleptic.
Yeah, that's it. And this gives them that wake up. Also for obesity, so people that need to lose weight. So this is part of the ephedrine that's in there, which you can get in cold medicines, etc. So the concoction that we get in South Africa, and I call it a concoction because you can get arrested for a packet of 20 rand tick. You spend 6 months to a year awaiting trial at Pollsmoor, getting raped or whatever else can happen. And eventually the case gets thrown out because it takes that long for the lab to send back the report, because the report will usually show 0.02% of whatever the ephedrine or whatever it was that was meant to be in there. But it does give you that enough of that kick that you require to, for example, stay awake. If you look on the left-hand side of my face, you'll see my jaw is broken, and that is from a steel tip boot. Because you're not allowed to fall asleep anyway. So if you are in a public spot and you're tired and you fall asleep, they're going to wake you up with a steel boot. So you try and stay awake as much as you possibly can throughout the night. Hence the fact that a lot of people look at around them in the streets and see people sleeping during the day and think homeless people are lazy. It's not about laziness. They're tired from the night before, not because they were causing nonsense, but because they were trying to earn a living. At some point in time, you have to do your scuttle that the next day you have something to live on. And the other thing is that obviously you get hunger pains, and this takes away the hunger pains. You don't want to see food after you've done it for a while, and obviously the energy. I mean, I used to at one stage live on the mountain in Sea Point, Upper Sea Point, above Ocean View Drive, and I used to go down every day with those big checkers trolleys, not the push trolleys, but the long ones, about 2-meter trolleys, 2 of them, and I used to go down from the mountain into town, all the way uphill into town, and then do the same in the afternoons. And after that, I'd go and scuttle, so that I'd get new stock for the day after, because I actually became the first homeless person to trade on the parade. They actually gave me a permit to trade on the parade. So TIC gives you the 3 things that you require. That's the energy, the staying awake, and it takes away your appetite. People that land up on the streets, I'm not talking about the people that were using it before, but the people that land up on the streets like myself get drawn into it because of that, because it really does give you that extra. I am not able to. I took a journalist up the other day. They're from the Netherlands, and they wanted me to take them on a sort of a tour through what my day would look like when I was homeless. And I just couldn't make it up all the way to the mountain without a half and a puff. Whereas a friend of mine said, Carlos, do you remember I used to do this in the winter with 3/4 shorts and a vest, and you would be pushing up? Yes, I remember it, but I can't see how I'll do it again. But that's one of the things of the drug that does it for you.
And people, how does an unhoused person acquire drugs? What is the cost, and who deals to the
It's
unhoused?
easily available. I mean, this is what I can't understand. They'll arrest people that go and buy a 20 rand packet of tick. That's what it costs. Unga, which is the heroin, which is really the dangerous drug of the two. Why I say that is tick, being the concoction that it is, it's not difficult to... it's a mental addiction, and so you can adjust your mind, because there's not much of the drug in you if you've done one packet of tick. That you can actually stop doing the drug. It's more unlearning because you make yourself believe that you can't do anything without it. You can't climb a mountain without it. You can't do, and so then you start thinking, okay, well, I'll do it just to do that again. But you can learn that off. Unga, on the other hand, is heroin, and so heroin is a physical addiction. If you don't have it in your body aches, you get cramps, you can't get up, and so without a wake up, Unga addict is worthless. I mean, and they in pain, and they in excruciating pain. The other thing about Strandfontein that was agonizing was to see these people go through their withdrawals without having any methadone or anything available to them. They were all given headache tablets and Sinutabs. What for? Yet they were telling the press that these people were given medication to come off their drugs. That was not the fact at all. So a lot of people went through hell.
So the unhoused are basically a market for the drug trade in a way.
They are an easy market, and they're not the biggest market. I always say, when people complain about the tent city in Sea Point, and about the syringes lying there and whatever, and the drug dealing taking place. And then I find it strange because in Ocean View Drive, you've got people that have been able to buy themselves stature in that community, that are known, not runners or dealers, but merchants and people that are have always been involved in drugs and in, people that start security companies that originated from bouncers in clubs and that type of thing.
Sorry, just I want to put a pin on the security.
Terrible.
Yeah. What security company is this, and who are they in league with, and what do they do to the unhoused?
I'll start off with the ones that really are troublesome and that become violent with and physically violent with. I really want to, and I hope they listen to it and they must know I'm coming. Through my column at the August, I really want to go undercover and go back as a homeless person, and I want them to attack me the way they used to do, because they actually are at certain streets which they try and close up. They're not closed streets, they're full public streets, and the police will tell you they're not allowed to do it, but they will park on a day that they know is the bin day for those streets. They'll park right on top there at the beginning to where that street sort of begins, and they'll chase you, and the dogs will be chasing you, and they're violent. They record you. They don't ask permission to take your photographs, but they do, and it becomes a whole sick. And it's in the very, very upmarket areas, and that's PPA. Now, PPA originates from there's a gentleman called Mark Lippman. That is very well known in South Africa as far as
You put up the thing, Nigel.
I'm 2 steps in.
Well, everybody knows he started it was a bouncer type of organization. I know I worked for the man unknowingly. I was security for one of his buildings in Sea Point when I was homeless, together with a guy called Rasta, where there was a 2-story building. I almost lost my life there. I almost broke my neck because I was thrown down 2 stories. And I didn't realize who this person was until then. But he started that security company. They're now a known security company. There was a big story about them in Camps Bay as well, where they attacked people that were drinking or something to that effect a few years ago, and they were investigated. But fact of the matter, most of these security companies are I can't say most of them, but there are some of them that are really and truly, they've been put in there specifically with the aim of getting rid of the homeless element coming into certain areas. And they are horrific.
Yeah, no, that's, you've made some very powerful enemies, but, why they want to do this is just simply to keep this sort of site unseen.
And the sad thing about it is that they actually, with PPA especially, in order to build up their business and to become, to have the amount of business that they have, they eventually moved into Vredehok as well, is that they actually create the scare. They actually come with these stories about what the homeless individuals are doing, and which is how it started with in Sea Point. I told you that when I landed up in Sea Point, there was a really a symbiotic relationship between the housed residents and the unhoused residents. And then at some point, there was a counsellor there that actually eventually resigned because of her the things that she said about the homeless people. I can't remember the lady's name. It was at the same time that Count Alderman J.P. Smith was also on the offence, making it sound as if everything that was happening in Sea Point, the break-ins into cars, etc., was all unhoused people. And it made people scared, and people started believing those stories, and that is used, to this day, PPA uses that type of frightening tactic, like a lot of people do with the elections, where they start, die swart gevaar. Well, this is the gevaar of the homeless.
And they have to be seen to be active, so they do these things so that they can increase their customer base at the expense of the unhoused.
I've always said, and I've got real stories to tell that will prove these things. In Ocean View Drive, people used to come, if anything happened in Ocean View Drive, car was broken into, etc., they'd come up to the unhoused guys that lived in on the mountain just off Ocean View Drive. Yet what they didn't realize is that a lot of the security guards working for the complexes that were directly on Ocean View Drive were the ones that were usually recruiting unhoused individuals to go and break into houses of the people that they were looking after. The security guards were aware they were away for whatever, how many days, etc., that they were on holiday or overseas, etc., and they were the ones orchestrating the break-ins, etc. The unhoused person is always the one that gets the short end of the stick in these negotiations. But I mean, there are some that will get involved in it because of the way that the community treats people living on the street. But they're not the orchestrators. They're not the ones that are, as with the drug setup. I mean, they're definitely not the ones supplying the drugs.
So let's. I just want to go back to Strandfontein, where they opened the gates in Culemborg, and then these 7 encampments sprung up around Cape Town.
Many more. There's probably about, I would say they developed into about 150 of them.
Oh, well, okay. Well, the 7 that the city are trying to...
There's a reason for that, yeah.
So what is the reason for the city of Cape Town wanting to demolish their encampments that they themselves placed the unhoused into?
What's important here is that there's a specific group of encampments, and there's only a group of 127 people involved in this whole eviction. Now, if this was about helping the homeless individuals, surely they'd be looking at all the encampments and all 7,011 people that are living in the CBD, but they're not. It's been focused specifically on 7, and 7 smallish ones, because there's only 127 people compared to 7,000. But these are the encampments that are specifically in a route where the tourists are able to see the encampments, where it is not good for the public image of the city. And I agree with all of that. But do that then, along with everything else that needs to be done, and do it for the benefit of those individuals. It's not for the benefit of the individuals if you are... I mean, the court case was going to be heard on last month, in any case, the end of the month.
The court case to stay the evictions.
Yeah, well, basically what happened was that the city got permission to issue notices of intent to evict, which they then did. The unhoused people had until I think it was the 29th of last month, to go to court and to, protest the evictions, or everybody accepted that it was going to actually be granted, that the evictions were going to, or the court order was going to be granted for the eviction. Then at the last hour, the 11th hour, an organisation from Johannesburg, a non-profit organisation from Johannesburg, filed intent to oppose the city's evictions. And so the court has now given the court date in October. And so until October, no evictions are allowed to happen. Yet they were happening again on Friday in Strand Street. And that is why I call them illegal, because irrespective of whether the people that are there are occupying the public space, maybe illegally, the courts have given them permission to stay there until an order of eviction comes. And so any intervention, be it from PRASA, be it from the law enforcement, be it from anybody, at the moment is illegal. And that people have to understand, whether you like it or not. But those 7 are specifically the route that the Red Bus takes, and where a lot of publicity for the city, it's bad publicity for the city, it doesn't look good. I don't agree with those encampments, I really don't. If you look at the one at the castle, which is the most unpopular one, it does smell. But what is smelling is the water that has been for years been used as a toilet, because there's been no public toilets in the centre of town until the CCID put up 2, I think, over December last year. But prior to that, if you went to the city centre, after the parade closes their toilets at 3 o'clock, there's no toilets. I mean, the CCID guards and everybody else uses that area. So it's years and years of waste going into that water. Now, of course, it's even worse because all the homeless have to use it. But then again, we're not providing them with services, are we? So what do we expect? And it won't look better until people feel that it's not going to be broken down, or if you know that law enforcement is going to come and break down that every second day, you're not going to respect that spot. You're not going to respect that space.
Do you feel that the city and the province and the powers that be are taking on board your experiences and your suggestions for how we can alleviate these this social condition, ultimately, it's not a law enforcement matter. It's a social condition.
You know, I don't know how to answer that. Let me tell you why I'm saying that. It obviously looks as if they're not, or it doesn't seem as if they are. But I will tell you that I know that my column is one of the. I was told by Dr. Badruddin at the MACO, with the previous mayor, my column was one of the first issues on the agenda to be read, and so they are definitely taking note of what I'm saying, but they don't agree with me. I had a discussion with the mayor about the evictions on WhatsApp not too long ago, and he very clearly, said to me he didn't agree with me. I am meeting with the city during the course of this week, and I'm hoping and praying that they stop seeing me as some anti-city, anti-DA, This is not about anti-anybody. This is about trying to explain to them what is really the situation and how people that are unhoused see and feel and are living and what they expect and what they need to be helped. And in so doing, not only are we helping the unhoused person, but we are helping the housed people around them. I don't believe that it's something that the national government on its own or the provincial government or even the city can handle. Let me tell you, we are in a situation at the moment that's already gone to the point that is too over. I don't think the city is overwhelmed, I think, to a large degree as well. And I would be too. My suggestion has been that it gets handed over to communities and to the ward councillors for every ward to handle their own, obviously with oversight from the city and with funding from the government. But the handling of those situations, because let me tell you that homeless or unhoused communities are also very different from area to area. A Sea Point unhoused community is very different to a Tableview unhoused community and every other area. I stay in Maitland now, and they are completely different to what I was used to in Sea Point and Vredehuk, that I know exceptionally well. So I think that our answer relies on communities. Communities can get to know their unhoused people, because this is the problem we have at the moment, is that the one doesn't trust the other. If we want to really employ, or we don't even have to look for employment opportunities for the homeless. We have got an opportunity in building up the recycling economy, for example. Because of the experience that unhoused people have, if we turn that into a business for them, last year the national government saved 900 million in not paying wages or not paying for the labor of collecting white paper and cardboard. Yet the unhoused community contributes 85% of that recycled material. And so if we can get over this thing that people digging in my bin is dangerous for me because they're going to break into my house and it's messy, those two things can be sorted very quickly.
We should be more conscious about the way we pack our bins.
But even that, they'll do anything.
Yeah.
If you are able to, and you can really, it won't even take months negotiations, it will be an instant thing. And you get to know your neighborhood and you start utilizing them for things that then they will be employed. In Brazil, it's an employment like any other. They get the same benefits as anybody else. And we are wasting that opportunity. Because then you don't have to look for employment to all these people. There's more than enough. And it's something that they know. You're not forcing them into anything that they don't know. So there are many, I always say, if you're looking for ways to house the unhoused or ways to employ the unhoused, look at the unhoused. Go speak to the unhoused and deal with the unhoused. Then you find your answers. Looking for them, like pie in the sky, like the, organizations are coming up with this program and that program. Please, man, just look at what they're doing and adapt it to something that is more organized, that is going to be beneficial to them, more so than it is at the moment, where they don't get paid for their labor, only for whatever they actually sell. So I'm hoping that they come with an open mind and with an open... I've now said everything again, so they're probably going to be upset with me about my Strandfontein, but it's something that I've gotten over. I don't hold it against anybody. I have to say it because it happened, and this is why we are in the situation that we are in, and these things aren't right, and we must never have it repeated again. And so I'll keep on saying it, and I'll keep on reminding people, but that doesn't mean that I can't work with them.
Oh, definitely. I think that these solutions won't come from the powers that be by themselves. It will come from people like you speaking truth to the powers that be and the partnership, because they don't have that that experience that they can rely on. Of course, they can create this economy that serves their NPOs and whatever the case may be, but ultimately it will benefit a small cohort of NPOs and those
even unhoused people,
but not
it's a very small number.
unhoused. Yeah. So, what would be some of your suggestions for them to that they can implement tomorrow, that they can implement this year? And
the Trash Treasures program that I sort of worked out, which is the recycling one, which we've actually sort of piloted in one area, is up for the grabs. I mean, none of these programs I actually want to run, because that's not what I'm here for. I think it's something that communities should be running. I really believe in opening up homeless hubs in every single ward where people can get services and people are... but the one thing that everybody, city, NGOs, anybody that's working on finding a solution must understand, do not ever take the agency and dignity away from those individuals, because they are individuals that happen to be in a certain situation. It doesn't detract from who they are, and they need that agency. Without that agency, I wouldn't be here. Had I not been granted that agency to become the best that I could be myself, and I'm not, I promise you, there are much younger, much more vibrant people with wonderful ideas that need to get exposed. I'm blessed in that I've been invited to a lot of the international communities are very eager to listen to unhoused people. I've been invited to Canada. I had a huge conference the other day, and it's sad to me that my own country isn't listening to not only myself, but there are a number of people that are people with lived experience that have got, and even the ones that are still in homelessness, that you can get so much out of, and that you can actually progress. Rather than, you can have as many books as you like, and you can Google as much as you like. At the end of the day, it's what's happening on the ground. I, for example, have my heart project, which is, I noticed that homeless people tend to, that have never even studied art or whatever, will sit down and suddenly be drawing. I mean, I had one friend that had never ever done it, and he started, and I thought to myself, it's unheard of, but it's not unheard of. There's so many of them. And so I started a program whereby I identify people that are doing art on the street, try to develop that. I've got people donating art materials, etc. And I can, if I show you the things that come out of this, is amazing. I mean, people can go onto my, I've got a Facebook page for the Heart, it's called Heart, and then Homeless Art with Heart. And it's absolutely brilliant, the things that they come up with. And it's not only painting. Some of them do pastel, some of them do sketching, some of them do beading, some of them do... we've got one guy that uses these loop pulls that you have on cans, yeah? And he makes like a chandelier or... I mean, it's amazing the things that they do. And so I'm quite... and again, it's not an idea that I got. I saw them doing it, and I thought, well, let's expose this. Because at the end of the day, the idea behind that is to teach them how to make that their business and to use that to get them out of homelessness. So that will... And that's sustainable, because, I mean, nobody's going to take away their talent. They can continue with it, and they can live a life. I mean, one of them is already accommodated. I've got another project which is associated to the Trash to Treasures program, which is a trash to cash, which is very similar.
Is this the...
no, it's not.
Okay.
No. It's Heart. It's on Facebook, but if you go onto my page, you might find it. But where was I? The Trash to Treasures. Trash to Cash is basically where we've taken... People often donate things that we cannot normally utilize. And so we started, based on what I used to do, where I had my market stalls, I started 4 market stalls with 5 guys each, and they get taught to run a small business. So it's a small business development type of upliftment and empowerment project. And we give them the donations that we've received from people. So some of the things are broken, etc. Then they get fixed by the guys. And they've got markets, for example, in town. There are 2 of the markets. There's one in Maitland. There's one in Sea Point. And so they start running their own little business. 4 of them, after 4 months of trading their little businesses, moved into a flat. They're now in a flat. So that type of thing is also sustainable because they're now no longer dependent on the donations, but they're actually buying things from people that are scuttling, and rather than going to sell it to dealers, they can now get decent prices by selling it to these guys. So there's a number of things that one can look at homeless people and see what we can do to make those things grow and be sustainable for them.
I think we're going to put a link up in the description to all of these.
Yeah, they've each got a Facebook page.
Yeah. So one year, 1st of May 2022 to 1st of May 2023. It's been a hell of a ride for you.
3 years.
3 years. Sorry, 3 years. Yeah. It's been
totally. I mean, I opened 2 houses for the homeless. It's been. I mean, who'd have thought that a homeless person would be able to do that and shown the city that this can be done, and you can change, have a transitional space where 87% of the people stay housed and 85% stay employed, and never go back to the streets in 3 years. It's been phenomenal. I mean, I've had opportunities that I could never thought possible when I was homeless and landing up on the outside of Kulenburg 3 years ago, but all these things did happen. That's when I realized that a lot has changed, and but a lot more has to change, unfortunately.
Carlos, thank you so much for coming in today.
Pleasure.
I think we broke the record today. It's 2 hours 10 minutes, and we could have gone on for a lot longer. So wish you all the best.
Thank you.
And welcome back anytime. Keep putting the pressure on the city, the positive pressure on the city and the province.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Nandel, we out, and we're going to be back tomorrow. Nazir Paulson of the EFF is coming in.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah.
Really looking forward to that one.
Cool. Thank you, Nandel.
Thank you very
Carlos.
much. Thank you all.
Cool, man.
And we out.
Thank you.